Well, hello everybody. Hola, hola. Welcome to No Bar, No Problem Virtual Bartending. My name is Jaime Salas. I am the newly appointed advocacy or head of advocacy for Jose Cuervo in the Proximo Spirits portfolio. And I'm particularly excited to be here and share a message from us to you, which essentially entails that there are no strangers. Jose Cuervo believes there are no strangers. And I've said this once before, so for those of you hearing it again, I insist that, Tales of the Cocktails is a good proponent of that, right? This is why we're here. We're reconvening, and hopefully we get to do this in person and vivo y directo next time this year, the same time next year, right? And that's the idea. So, for me, this particular subject is very near and dear to my heart. I've did quite a few virtual. I was telling everybody on the call here earlier. I did quite a few virtual tutorials and trainings and all that stuff. So I know that a lot of the hard work that goes into this. And so, without further ado, I'm gonna pass it over to Eric Scott and Austin Foster to tell us a little bit about their experiences, what they did, and all the great stuff that Shaker Spoon is doing, etc. So take it away and good luck.
All right. Thanks, Jaime, and thanks, Jose Cuervo, for sponsoring the CAP sessions. We're really excited to work with you guys and in the future as well. So my name is Eric Scott. I'm a Tales of the Cocktail Apprentice, 2017, 2019. And I think that's it for now, right? We're on hold. Austin, we also have as a cocktail apprentice. And we have a few panelists on as well, Mike and Alicia from Shaker and Spoon. For those of you, many of you may have seen their sort of subscription-based boxes that are really, really cool. So I want to talk just for 1 second about the Cocktail Apprentice program, because it's while we're here, and we do have a few cocktail apprentices on, but I see a lot that are not cocktail apprentices as well. The Cocktail Apprentice program is sort of the engine of Tales of the Cocktail. You kind of fill out an application, bartenders from all over the world, and then you get chosen to go to Tales of the Cocktail and work your butt off for free for an entire week. But in the meantime, you're a part of the greatest mentorship program in the business. You get to learn and work side by side with some of the best. And the opportunities that come from it are really wonderful. So if it's something that you're interested in, I would highly recommend filling out an application in January or so, if that's when they start again. That's usually when they are. I'm just going to say hi. I'm going to introduce myself and who I am. We're going to just do a quick 2-minute snippet so you know who we are, and then we'll get into the meat of it. So my name is Eric Scott. I'm a bartender, beverage director in Bay Village, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. It's actually where I live. I live and work just a couple blocks I live a couple blocks from where I work. And I've been there for 2.5 years since we've opened. Austin Foster, you want to tell us about yourself, please?
Sure. Hey, my name is Austin Foster. I also was part of the CAP program 2018. I tried to make sure I didn't go a year that Eric was there. I put Drink in a Cup currently in Sioux City, Iowa, and I've done a number of these virtual sessions with Eric, and then with other groups as well. So I'm excited to have the chance to talk to you folks.
Thanks, man. And Austin and I actually did about 15 or so of these virtual events together, which is we made a good pair once we figured out what we were doing on like the 15th try, right? And then we have Mike and Alicia. Just if one of you guys want to just kind of explain who you are and tell us about you guys a little bit.
Sure. My name's Alicia. I'm the Distinct Experience Lead at Shaker and Spoon. So I help people arrange all sorts of orders that are outside of the regular subscription model. So helping bartenders with their events, or folks with, large scale conferences, favors, bachelor parties, really anything goes.
Awesome. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh yeah, and I'm a founder and CEO here at Shaker and Spoon. Do a little bit of everything at the company, but happy to kind of particularly answer questions about any sort of logistics, shipping questions, compliance questions, even legal things like that. We We here at Shaker and Spoon send tens of thousands of cocktail kits out to people all over the United States, and have been doing that for about 6 years now. So we've jumped through a lot of those hoops. We've kind of figured out best practices, at least theoretically, and happy to share those insights.
It's pretty sweet. Compliance is such a scary word.
Isn't
the
it?
word compliance puts the fear of God in me.
It kind of should.
Right. It's like the moist of law words. It's just like. So talking about virtual bartending and kind of how it came about, 2 years ago, this would have been something that would have been really real quick. Please, if you have any questions, jump on and either raise your hand or jump on the chat and ask some questions, and we'll kind of monitor this. And if anybody, we'll open it up to voice discussion later. But if you have any questions, please go on there, and one of us moderating will jump in at the appropriate time. So thank you guys all for being here and taking time out of your day to listen to this as well. So hopefully we can get something out of this for you. 2 years ago, the idea of like virtual bartending was really hard to wrap your head around, because it was very it wasn't a thing. Like, the reason we went out to bars and restaurants was often for the social aspect. Not always, as bartenders, it's our goal to kind of read the room, right? When somebody comes in and they want to be left alone and things like that. But for the most part, bars in the idea of bartending is largely centered around social interaction. So the idea of doing it virtually just didn't really make sense. For me, it happened very, very quickly. When we, in March of last year, we were getting ready to do our first wine dinner. I'm also a sommelier, so I handle the wine side as well. And we had a winemaker coming in at the end of March. And of course, everything shut down. And we started doing Ohio, where I'm at, was one of the very first places to do to-go cocktails. And this was very, very important, because this led the way in doing the virtual, legally, for us to do this virtual stuff where we could package and send things out, because we would send them with food, right? So every state you're in or country or whatever, it's, you have to kind of know what the law is at the time and sort of use it to build your virtual event. So we very, very quickly were trying to figure out a way to make money. My chef owner for my restaurant is a caterer, and he has his background in catering. So he very quickly started packaging up food to go, and people were, this was at the time when food was hard to find in grocery stores, and he would package it up and you would take it home and stick it in the oven for 30 minutes, and then you'd have short ribs and everything for everybody. So we were kind of putting it together. One of my wine reps came to me and said, hey, this well-known wine store was doing a virtual wine event, and the idea was you would just buy 2 bottles of wine, and then you would open them and have them with the winemaker. And I thought, boy, that's really great, but I want to do the wine dinner experience. So we took the wine and opened it up and started putting them in the 8-ounce bottles that we had to go. So we actually did 4 different wines, just so you didn't have all these big open bottles. And then we packaged the food, and we did it with a winemaker from Italy, who is actually doing a live event next week at our restaurant for the first time. And we had 120 people on this event, and it was really, really amazing. We had a lot of fun, and it quickly escalated into cocktails and wine dinners and things like that, spirit tastings and things like that. So that's kind of how it started. But we found that, and I'm finding that in the restaurant, that people that I'm in right now, that people love this. They love the idea of being able to drink at home, and they do it for the camaraderie. But I live in a cold weather state, and people don't like to go out in the middle of January. Some people just don't want to deal with bars and restaurants, especially in the state that we're in right now. So we have a lot of people saying, I'm not really worried about what the health climate is going to be in 3 months. I just like doing this and doing this from home, and I feel safe. So we're going to kick it off again. So it at least appears, and I'm going to, Austin, what do you think? You did a lot of spirit tastings. This is here to stay, right? I mean, this is going to stick around for a while.
Yeah, I think that it's been and I apologize, guys, if there's any loud noise or my audio is off. I'm currently at a rock festival bartending, so stepped out to the car to talk on it. But I think this format is definitely been a great outlet from a bartender standpoint to do all of the dang stuff that we like to do in terms of educating. And what was really interesting as we've done a number of these was that interaction piece, because uh, and I know many of us on have done events and things of that nature, but what I find is when you're doing an event, there's almost a good portion of the crowd that isn't really there for the whole thing, right? Particularly when you introduce spirits and people have had a couple of tastes of spirit. Conversations get loud. They start to detract from like the four people that are dialed into the session for the whole time. So I really kind of enjoyed that from a format standpoint, and I kind of see a lot of value in that, particularly for folks like you said in our markets. I also hail from a cold weather market, so absolutely.
I want to ask the Shaker and Spoon folks, um, you guys have done some of these virtual events with bartenders, right? And you guys have, I think, at least you told me you have 15,000 subscribers, right? You basically package everything and then you ship it out, and then they have to get the alcohol, right? But that's the only thing they have to worry about. Everything else. How has the reaction been to these events, and do you guys see this trend staying?
Yeah, I don't see this going away, especially if you're interested in working with corporate groups. So team building, happy hour, people are staying at home, and teams are not located in one geographic area. They're across the country, they're in Canada, they're across the world, and people don't seem like they want to change that. So I don't think virtual events are going anywhere.
Yeah, they're happy to spend, $100 on a kit and pay a bartender, a good amount of money to avoid, putting everybody on a plane and, flying them to, out to the corporate headquarters in, Dallas or something. So it really is like people are happy to do it. It's really cool. And I did a lot of these as well, where, we had people all over the country. So the question, is for people that haven't done this, I'm going to kind of go over my experience. And Austin, like, please jump in because you've done a lot of your own too. But I'm going to share with you my experience of how I really started to like get this dialed in, because you have to, when you start to develop your own virtual event, there's a lot of things that you have to consider. For me, it was very, very easy because I mentioned before that I'm in a town called Bay Village. It's a very walkable community. I'm the only game in town in the center of the town. So I'm kind of like the mayor, like everybody knows me. Everybody trusts what we do at our beverage program and the bartenders that work there and our chefs. So it was very, very easy for us to get people just through social media to get people to jump on board. But 3 years ago, I was the beverage director at the Kimpton downtown. And that's a very transient crowd. The people that come in there don't really have that connection to me or what I do. So if I were still there, getting an event like this sold would have not been easy, because people would have been like, well, I travel to Kimpton once a month, but I live in San Francisco. I don't give a shit, So, so for me, it was very easy. So, but maybe you don't have that. So, some advice that I would like to share of how I started with this sort of thing in sort of ways that I sort of made pivots when I needed to is, I started to, look at like, what's my passion? And that might be, you as a bartender, like, what is your passion? If you are a tiki bartender, you probably don't want to start out with a beer event. If you are, if your thing is in the classics, maybe tiki isn't your thing, or or so on. But start with kind of, the easy stuff, because there's a lot of great stories to be told in the easy stuff, right? Austin and I, one of the big things we did is when I developed this cocktails, we did a cocktails 101, and then we did a 201 and a 301. So we saw all these repeat customers, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was a way that it could grow upon itself. But we did very simple drinks, right? We did the gin gimlet, and we did the old fashioned. We did the martini and the Manhattan. But the stories that came with it, Austin and I are sort of what we would call classically trained bartenders, as a lot of people on here are. So we love the stories that we learned from, Dave Wondrich or Dale DeGroff and all these things that are out there that maybe we don't know, but our guests or our audience don't know. So for us, go ahead, Austin.
No, I was just going to say, as part of that, with a captive audience, we could tell all of our stories. And a lot of times when you're behind the stick, you don't get that level of interaction with your guests. So I found that to be a pretty great part of the format, right? Because it's really a good opportunity for you to actually work through an entire sort of educational tidbit for folks and be able to tell stories around that. Another thing I really liked about your format, Eric, is that a lot of our the folks that were on do not have bar tools, right? And how Eric packaged a lot of these kits was in a way that allowed it to be affordable for your community, but it wasn't like everyone got a full bar kit day one, right? You did the 101, you did the 201, you did the 301, and by the time you've done a few of these sessions, you've got a pretty accomplished bar setup at home. So I really enjoyed that as part of your ability to spread it to the community there.
So that's a good point. I was going to get into that in a few minutes, but since we brought it up, I'll talk about it now. There's a couple things that I really noticed with doing these virtual events. In that, number one, we're making drinks. So when you jump on, if you're gonna make, let's say, a margarita or a daiquiri or a gin gimlet or whatever, you're probably not gonna go, okay, ready, go, and then make it up. And you're gonna tell a story first, right? There's some build up there, but people are ready to start the party right away. So one thing that we noticed is that we would, because it worked within the parameters of what we did in our state law, we would give them a simple cheese plate. They would come and pick it up, and that would be their gateway into us, allowing us to package the booze. We would start with a welcome cocktail. So this was something that we would do in advance, and it was ready to go. So it was just a matter of pouring it out and having it on ice, because people are excited and they're ready to go. And so, Austin, I think we learned pretty quickly, that people, so you get a drink in their hands, people, that's what they're there for. So get something in their hands, and then you have something to tell them about. We did a tiki one time where I think we had a ready to go Mai Tai or something. And then one of the coolest ones we did was with Alexis from the Aviary in Chicago, was on with us for an event. That was the day we did the mint julep on the Kentucky Derby. It was pretty cool. But she actually had given me a recipe for an Aviary milk punch. It took me like 47 days to put it together, but I managed to put it together, and it was a clarified milk punch. And when the people came out and picked up their kit, they had an actual Aviary cocktail in their kit that wasn't made at the Aviary, but it was made by us to their spec. So that was really, really, really cool as well. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to point out is, the events that I've noticed, the longer the shopping list that you give to people, the less likely they are to do it. It doesn't matter what the cost is. You might be giving them like, hey, I'm only charging $12 for this, but you just have to pick up limes and dem sugar and bitters. So my lowest numbers were always when it was very like involved with a big shopping list. So one thing that I like about Shaker and Spoon is that, like, yes, in the ideal world, we would maybe have liquor with it. But if you tell to somebody like, hey, all the hard stuff is done, pick up your favorite bourbon, pick up your favorite gin, that's all you have to do. Then you have leftover on the shelf and you can do it later. It makes it a little bit more approachable, wouldn't you guys say?
Yeah, I definitely would say. And also it keeps, if you're shipping these things, it keeps the shipping costs really low. Nobody has to sign, it's not a big heavy package. It doesn't need to be insured for all sorts of special stuff. And it's just been a crazy time. And I think people don't have the brain space to attend to the details of going to the store and getting things. Like you said, they just want to sit down and have a drink, learn something new, get moving. And we also have a lot of requests for zero proof cocktails. A lot of corporate clients have a strong interest in this. Either they're not allowed to provide alcohol or even to suggest it, or they know they have people on their team who don't drink and they want to be very respectful of that and have plenty of options for them to choose from. And it's also kind of a nice way. We do have people request things for their kids. They're like, well, my kids want to join us, or maybe they want to have like a virtual event that's a fundraiser for their school. And they're into like, getting their kids involved. So just something to keep in mind.
That's a great point. I did a lot of the events that I did were people were asking me. I didn't even have the chance to have to address it, where they were saying, hey, how about zero proof options or things like that. So we would make an old fashioned. We would have them pick up. We would ship out barley tea or something like that, and we would then go that route. So it was really, really cool, because then we could tell the same story. We wouldn't have to really, people, it's kind of like, when you make an NA cocktail for somebody who maybe is pregnant, or for whatever reason, they just don't want the people they're with knowing that they're not drinking alcohol. And it's our job to discreetly sort of provide them with that, where they can feel like, they don't have to answer any questions. So this kind of like also giving that zero proof option takes like a lot of the focus off of, them doing something different. They're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. So it's really, really cool. That's a great point. Real quickly with the packaging, there's if you go, if at my Instagram, or for my restaurant, it's called Timetable, and it's spelled THY, like ME, like the herb, and there's an X in the middle, Timetable. In our like permanent stories, you can click on Cocktails 101, and it will show you some story feeds of stuff that Austin and I did, and some of the packaging that we did. We used, if I don't know if it's worldwide, so I apologize to, I know we saw somebody who is in Belgium. Yeah, I lived in Zaventem for a little while. But anyway, for packaging, at least here in the States, there's a company called Berlin Packaging. And there's also thanks, Alex. There's also a company called Uline. Uline is really great. The letter U, L-I-N-E. I don't know if you guys work with Uline, but at Shaker and Spoon, yeah. So you can go in, you can get glass bottles, you can get crinkle paper, you can get all of this stuff you can get to your house, where you can put these kits together. So this was really instrumental for myself, because we would order this stuff from Uline, and then I would be able to sort of drop in an orange and a piece of dem sugar and a little plastic ramekin of cherries or something like that. Something that was very easy to put together. For 100 people, it might take me 5 or 6 hours to do everything, but we'd have little glass bottle options for like a dem sugar or something like that. But like Austin said, we were doing sort of a progressive kit. So we would start with the 101, and we would order a Boston shaker set with a strainer and a bar spoon, nothing expensive, like nothing from Cocktail Kingdom or anything, but something that we could, charge reasonably. And these kits would come out and they'd be $85, and it'd be all in, they'd have everything in there. And then if they did the 201, Austin, we would have, what else did we would put in? Like one time when we did the mint julep, we put in a bag and a hammer. We did a jigger for one of them. So, right.
So I think we focused shaken cocktails, and then we focused on stirred cocktails, and then we kind of went beyond that with the Lewis bag and mallet and stuff. But I think that I think it's really interesting, because when I was going through this and kind of working through from a corporate standpoint, I'd love to have some of the input from the Shaker and Spoon folks, because they figured out sort of the process. When I was trying to price these things out, just from a corporate standpoint and corporate event standpoint, I did not, at least the first couple I did not take into account how much work that is to just build out each of the packages. And that's something that you absolutely have to factor in when you're kind of putting these sessions on and you're trying to price it appropriately. It was the amount of prep there to prep everything individually. For some odd reason, I thought it was at least 1.5 times what it would have taken if I had everyone in the space, and if I was doing it in the restaurant, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I think that is something that for me, it was like, oh yeah, what, I'll prep it. I'll knock it out. We've done a lot of big event type things before, but I felt that when we were sending out individual kits, that was more time consuming than I had originally planned for initially.
Well, when you're doing that, you're basically you're doing all your batch work the way you normally would, and then you're basically taking all of that stuff and then repackaging it in these tiny little bottles, bags, what have you. It's a lot of work, and it's thankless work that nobody really appreciates, which is one of the frustrating things. It's a hard thing to figure out how to charge for. But yeah, you absolutely have to factor that in, because otherwise you will, like, it's one of those things where the economics have to make sense. And I can tell you, on our end, we've spent 6 years of both kind of figuring out and getting some of it quite pricey equipment in order to do that more efficiently. And then obviously part of it is also just buying things in larger quantities. So Berlin is something we use. There's a few others for bottles, like e-bottles is something we used initially. SKS is another place that will sell at relatively small quantities, but we've moved on to larger vendors where our prices are smaller, but we're buying things by the pallet at this point. And that's kind of how we've been able to reduce those costs. And then we, of course, kind of work really hard to kind of establish relationships with vendors such as Cocktail Kingdom, or Barfly is another really good one for high end. Barfly is really nice for high end, but not insanely priced bar tools. We found their quality pretty equivalent to Cocktail Kingdom, the prices to be about half the cost. But all of that kind of tends to come with volume, and that's a hard thing to get to.
It really is very, it's tough to sort of get down to sort of a system, but also don't be scared of it, because the nice thing is when we're doing this sort of bartending without walls, it's not much harder to do it for 100 people than it is to do it for 20 people, because you have to sort of get your mise en place out. And then once you start getting everything going, you start to, my struggle is, if I have if I'm doing an old fashioned, most of my kits are made for 2 people. So if I sell 50 kits, it's 100 people. And then I'm stripping out 100 orange peels, and then I'm trimming them, things like that. But this is like pick up on the day of. But, one nice thing is if you're selling these kits, one thing that's really, really cool is sort of, you can apply a fair markup to this kit, so you can build in your price to the kit that's separate of even sort of your charge or your tip. I've done a few of these kits for 100 people where these are I don't know exact numbers, but these are 4-figure sort of income that I made from one event, and then I'm able to bring in somebody like Austin and pay him fairly for his time to come in and just jump on for a little while and help out. And that's a really, really good feeling to have, to be able to have that opportunity to be able to do something like that. So there's the thing about the kits is they can be a little bit scary because you're kind of building them. But if you're factoring the proper sort of upcharge and you find a good way to sort of price that out, you can build your labor into that, and then you can do pretty well. Web restaurant store is a good one too, for like 85-cent, like muddlers and stuff like that. So those are one that we use quite a bit. And then another one I wanted to point out is especially if on the side of maybe not packaging and partially packaging, but would be teaming up with people. If you're in a position like I had mentioned earlier, I'm very fortunate to be in a place where sort of my product or my event sells itself, but I realize that not everybody has that opportunity. So maybe you're even as simple as you're not the head bartender, and these are things that you're walking on. You want to be careful when you're doing this stuff. So, but you're certainly allowed to do your own events separately. So some things is teaming up with people, right? Like, so for instance, Brands is a good place to start. If you have, and maybe we have some brand people on here. Brand people were very excited to work with us because, you know, a lot of times from, you know, brands have like swag and things like that, but they also, you know, people want booze from them. And sometimes with laws and stuff, it makes it a little bit tricky. But if you can use your brand, I think Austin, we did the 301 where we had Gabby Holzer, who's one of my bartenders, and she's a tiki bartender, and Austin knows a lot about tiki. That's not really my thing, so I was very thankful to have them on. But Mount Gay jumped in with us, and they gave us 100 copper tiki mugs. So we were able to build onto their kit and just be like, boop, here's your tiki mug. Another thing is for printing. Brands are very good at printing. So one thing is, like, especially if you're looking to break into this corporate thing, a lot of people found us just by Google, which is, to me, is like, you know, but a lot of these corporations or law firms or whatever, they don't know where to go, right? They're not in our network. So get out there and pound the pavement, you know, if you want to do like a holiday cocktail thing and you start to develop what you're going to do, maybe you want to do for Christmas, we did eggnog for two from scratch in Shakerton. It was really pretty badass. But that was awesome, right? That was so cool. But you know, it was holiday themed. Yeah, you know, if you're teaming up with, let's say, a brand of brandy or whatever for that, or rum, have them help. You know, so and so brand Jose Cuervo is you know, sponsoring, you know, Austin Foster, and then you can sort of have them print up something, a nice card, and you can take these to businesses, and you know, all it has to do is fit in the right one or two hands, and then their friends ask, and their friends ask, and that kind of happened with us, you know, as we had these local events. And then all of a sudden I was doing events for Moen International and Athleta and these different large brands. And it was not even in Ohio. It just, the word kind of spread that fast. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that.
I was just going to say, you might want to reach out to your local chamber of commerce. You know, local business folks might want to do something. And there's definitely a seasonal vibe. People want to offer, you know, we're getting a lot of Halloween requests right now. There's always going to be holiday requests, or even just sort of like fall themed, anything that has even just a very minor niche edge is extra exciting to folks. So, and I do think if you reach out to people locally, you would be surprised that people want to offer something special to their clients, their guests. And I think people will respond. So go for it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great idea. The local chamber of commerce, like, especially if you don't have a partner for shipping, like keeping your events local probably makes the most sense. Obviously, I kind of imagine that that's where your roots are. Especially if you're in a medium or small size city, I would try to find some local media sources. Like, you'd be surprised how easy it is. Like, just you know, getting into the New York Times is a challenge, obviously. But you know, if you're in, you know, a decent sized or small sized city, you're going to have a handful of local newspapers, magazines, and honestly, write to them, tell them like, hey, we're doing events, and there's a decent chance that they might publish that. That might be your easiest avenue. I know a lot of what Alicia does is just kind of trying to, like, she obviously has been doing this for a little while. She knows who are, you know, who are good clients for her. And having that experience, I think she spends a lot of time just kind of on LinkedIn trying to find, again, we do go after corporate clients a lot more than I think that this panel is kind of focused on, but just, but yeah, like literally going, like trying to find like those office managers on LinkedIn for your local businesses and say like, hey, I'm a local bartender. I do these events. If you guys need client gifts locally, if you want to do, you know, happy hour with your team, I make these kits. Like that is, you know, that's how we do get a decent amount of our business actually. So yeah, I would try to go after those sources, and yeah, obviously just kind of your social media, try to get your friends to blast it out. Again, if it's, especially if it's trying to be local, like that is, that's probably not a bad way. And Eric, I think what you mentioned about kind of like printing out some flyers, taking it to a local business, especially if you can get a brand to pay for that print job. It's a fantastic idea.
There's another way that I wanted to mention as well, is especially if you're going after sort of the local market. And I saw some questions in the chat, and we'll get to them shortly. You know, shipping is definitely an issue, and maybe you don't have access to, you know, Shaker and Spoon at this time. You know, another thing that, you know, is when we talk about picking up, or if you do have to give them a shopping list, make it as simple as possible. You know, if we do, one of the reasons we do the gimlet, the gin gimlet and an old fashioned is, you know, we do sort of a classic sort of sour drink and then a classic cocktail. You know, we make it like you just buy a lime, buy some sugar, buy this, buy some bitters. You know, try and be very careful about, you know, the mint, and then I'm going to have you make orgeat, and then like start with, you know, there's these great stories behind these cocktails that, let's face it, a lot of people have never had a great gin gimlet. Austin, we did a lot of those on the 101, and it's amazing. You know, you hear all the time, like, I don't like gin, and we don't give them a choice. We're like, if you want to participate, this is the drink you're having. And Austin, how many times have you ever heard in the hundreds of people, they say, gosh, I can't believe I like gin. This is really great.
Well, I mean, I think many of us get to hear it a lot when we're actually behind the stick, right? So, but what was really interesting is how, at least for the dinners, we did it in pairs, right? So you're doing 2 cocktails effectively in each kit, and I thought that was wonderful because everyone got to enjoy the same drinks, whereas they might order different drinks if they were out. So I know that we definitely changed some minds on gin for sure, and a few of those things. Yeah.
And that was a matter of just sort of keeping things simple. So that would be my advice, is especially like, you know, there's a great story about the old fashioned or gin gimlet or a Sazerac or whatever you're making, but you know, keep it simple, because a couple of reasons is simplicity. It really allows people to understand how using good ingredients and good techniques and keeping things really fresh, how much of an impact that has, and it will also make them much more likely to subscribe to what you're doing or pay for it, because it's another thing that they don't have to. If you do have to give them a shopping list, make it as short as possible, make it as concise as possible, because otherwise you start to, you know, you can start to really lose people when you start using, you know, words that, you know, that might seem a little bit intimidating, and they say, oh, that's just too much work. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, also what I would say, just to tie into that, is have a specific purpose for your presentation or what have you, right? The corporate happy hour events that I've done have varied, right, in terms of what they actually wanted to achieve, because some of it ends up being half team meeting and half happy hour, right? And not everyone is interested in every bit of that story, you know. Sometimes we want to have a drink, we want to enjoy people, and whereas in those cocktail classes we did some deep dives and we did some geeking out. We gave people basically a framework, right? We were focusing on classics where, hey, these are the mechanics behind it, and go wild with it, and here are some suggestions on different ways. Oh, the sour thing is you know, is pretty relevant, and it changes when you change the spirit, or it changes when you change the modifiers. So just knowing what that focus is, like if you're going to nerd out about cocktails, like, you know, make sure that's kind of described as part of that.
That's a very, very good point. Is, you know, when I've done some of these cocktails, you know, obviously when we do like the corporate stuff, you know, a lot of times it's sort of like, hey, we will meet, we'll have, you know, 30-minute discussion, and then we want you to jump on and do this. And then, you know, it's kind of like, you know, some of these TV spots or whatever you do, where you just real quickly jump in and make a cocktail. So you have to like really shorten your story. and know that people respond differently to these type of things when they're paying for it versus when their boss is paying for it, right? They're very, very different. So you always have to remember that, and remember that when you're doing something for a corporate event, that you're not sort of the star of the show, or at least you shouldn't appear to be. You're there to sort of help them, develop whatever it is, whatever vision it is that they want from the event. I wanted to talk, there's a couple more things before I open up to you guys and Shaker and Spoon, and then go to questions, because these hours go very quickly. When we talk about partnering, another thing is, if you're doing sort of an event and you want to sort of like do this locally, where you maybe don't want to involve like shipping, where it's kind of pick up. Another thing to do, if you don't have like this huge network of regulars that are just going to jump on, is, partnering besides just brands. But let's say you're doing a wine tasting, one of the first places I'm going to go is to a cheese shop. Let's say there's a local cheese shop that's really, really good, and just go in there and say, hey, I'm interested in doing an event. I might not have hundreds of regulars, but you do. So let's tap into that. Or, whether it's a bookshop, or, every state or country has different places where you can legally buy alcohol. What is your relationship with these people, and how can you get like your local liquor agency to maybe jump on board and say, hey, if you're interested in selling this sort of thing, could we team up together? And now all of a sudden, you, instead of worrying about your own group of regulars that maybe you might not have if you work like in a downtown hotel or something, you can tap into other local networks. And also with partnering, Austin and I learned it's really, really great to have a partner, because let's say you're not a bartender who, maybe you're more like, you're usually the guy on service bar, right? You're not the big talker. And so something like this is a little bit intimidating. You're probably going to want to, maybe if you have that bartender who does have more of a shtick with people, you can team up with them, because, Austin and I, neither one of us have a problem talking, but, you can team up with people. You can read when the other person needs a little bit of help, and you can sort of see that, if you're not sort of the person who's really great about, talking with people, you team up with somebody who is. So it's the same way that we work behind the bar, right? I'm a lot of things, but I'm also a notoriously messy bartender. They call me like I'm like the wind up toy soldier that just and smashes through everything. So I'm also the person who schedules all the bartenders. So I always have bartenders with me that are orderly and neat, because it's very, very important to the functionality of the bar. So these are things even virtually that you have to be able to consider.
Yeah, even just having someone on to moderate, right, or to ensure someone's tracking the questions and staying in the chat and answering questions, like Alicia's answering some questions in chat and stuff like that. I think that stuff's very, very important as well. And then the other part is, at least for me, I know that it's more interesting when you've got multiple people talking. You get different perspectives, different stories, and just a different vocal tone. So, yeah, I like the tag team stuff that we've done for sure.
Yeah, and there's definitely ways that we can even, team up together, and you could even do something like this. Let's say Austin is in Sioux City, I'm in Cleveland. There's no reason that we can't sort of make our own sort of kits, and we could do this to a two-city audience. You can team up if you're in a small market. If Austin is in Sioux City, South Dakota, he doesn't have the audience that he's going to have with me in Cleveland. So if Austin wants to do an event like this, when we talk about teaming up with people, he might want to hit me up, because we might be able to really get those numbers up by going to a mid-sized market or a large market. So these are things to consider when you're teaming up with people as well. And the last thing that I wanted to say from my perspective before we sort of turn it over to some of the other panelists is that bartending virtually is, you have to read the room in the same way we do the way we read our bar, because a lot of people do this because they like to just kind of sit back and not have their camera on. I highly encourage people to have their cameras on, of course we don't make them, but we encourage it because it feels more social. You'll see people in the back, they want to talk, they want to act up and have a little fun and interact in the same way they would at the bar. So give them the opportunity to do that and try and read that, because it'll make it a lot more fun for everybody. One of the best experiences I had was when wine dinner I did with Frog Sleep. And I don't know if we have any wine people in there, but they had a guy named Jonah Beer, who is the wackiest, craziest, coolest dude you'll ever meet in the wine world. And he's outrageously hilarious. And we did a wine dinner with Jonah, and he was looking at the screen, and he was pulling people. He was looking at their situation in the background, and he was having fun with them. He was poking like, oh yeah, with that bearskin rug you got back there. So he was encouraging people to interact, and they really, really loved it. And sometimes they would just nod their head, and then the camera would go off and like, okay, not you, let's move on to the next person. So, really sort of encourage that community. And the easier that you have partners dealing with this, the easier it is for you to sort of, to focus on those things and not have to focus on all the different ingredients that maybe you made a little bit too difficult. So make it as easy as possible on yourself so that people can have a lot of fun. Austin, I want to get some here from Shaker and Spoon. Do you have anything to add to anything I had to say? Or I think Austin's frozen. He's got a mean face on. He must have had to throw somebody out of that concert. He looks like he's about to throw somebody out. Shaker and Spoon, I want to hear from you guys, just from what you guys have learned from this business and packaging perspectives and things like that.
Yeah, Alicia, do you want to talk about client experience a little bit, and I can
Sure.
talk about packaging a little bit after that?
I just wanted to second what Austin said. If you are doing, virtual on Zoom or another similar platform, it's really helpful to have somebody who is what we would call the admin host. So that person who's purely in charge of letting people in and out, or if you're doing breakout rooms, which is another great way to get multiple bartenders involved. Maybe it's a group of 100, and then you want to give a more personal experience to smaller groups of 20 or 15 or whatever. You can have 2, 3, 4 bartenders going around to the different rooms and giving a sort of smaller, more intimate experience. But having that admin host to handle logistics is so helpful, just to curate the chat, to pick out people's questions, especially in a large group, to help you focus. Oh, so-and-so is struggling opening their bottle. Do you have any tips? Things like that. I think it can just sort of like let that part of your brain go, let somebody else handle it. And it's worked out really nicely for the events that we've worked on. And also some of the lift can definitely be taken over by a company like ours. So for instance, you don't have to peel orange peels. We can ship people individual atomizers of orange oil, and they can just spritz and on they go. So there's a lot that is out there to help you. You don't have to do everything if you don't want to. So just there are options. There's lots of different ways to do this.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to talk about packaging and certainly answer any questions about that. Shipping, compliance, it's what we do all day long. I think Austin called out a few great packaging places. I would definitely just think about what you need to do for packaging. Like, are you doing local events? Are you shipping? If you're shipping, it's a lot of different considerations on top of what are quite high shipping rates. Maybe there is a shipping partner. Obviously, we ship all day long. We have worked really hard to negotiate our shipping rates. Like, I think everyone is just constantly shocked by how expensive shipping is, especially with companies like Amazon making free shipping just such a easy thing. But you're gonna spend maybe $10 a box shipping something. If you're adding alcohol, it'll be $20 to $30 a box, depending on where it's going. If it's going real far, might be $50, $60, and then we're still talking about relatively small size boxes. So just keep that in mind. There's a really high shipping cost, and if you are able to work with a shipping partner, I might suggest keeping your events local just for that reason alone. It's going to save so much stuff. Also, I do see a question about how far in advance do you make sales of kits. I would also factor in whether or not you're shipping, because if you are shipping, keep in mind, like FedEx and UPS, they guarantee shipping, what that guarantee means is if your shipment does not arrive at the right time, they will refund you the cost of the shipment. That doesn't, no shipper is perfect, and no matter what, you're gonna, if you're shipping, especially if it's not something you're particularly used to, if you're not used to packaging things that way, things are going to break. I mean, things break for us all the time, and we've been doing this for years, and I think we've gotten better at it over that time. Breakage happens, so keep that in mind. Like, it's something really important to us. We like to use all glass. We like to use recycled materials. So we don't send bubble wrap. We don't send like the packing peanuts. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to focus on plastic because maybe that doesn't matter and you don't want to worry about things breaking. For packaging, Uline was a savior in the beginning too, that it's a really easy place where you can buy, like 100 of one size box, and they have some version of everything, which is nice. Something we did for the first almost 3 years before we went and found our own supplier and printed our own boxes is I went to a local place here in New York City that makes stamps, and we like literally stamped each one of our boxes. You can find relatively inexpensive online like sticker printing places, things like that. So you can find not too expensive ways of sort of branding what you're sending without kind of going through the trouble of, spending thousands of dollars on printing plates and making like print runs of 10,000 units to make it to make the scaling efficient. Like I understand that's something that takes a long time to get to. So just think about, I would definitely think about that. I would think about how you're packaging, and I would probably urge you that if you don't have a shipping partner, to try to kind of think about your events locally. I actually love Eric's idea of, hey, you have a friend in a different city. Why don't you have it be a 2-city event where you guys host together? You can bring in a larger audience. I think, Eric, you made the point earlier where making 100 of something is not that much harder than making 20 of something. I would actually disagree with you. I would say making 100 of something is easier than making 20 of something, because you're still charging every single person something, and it is going to be easier to both buy that packaging of 100 bottles versus 20 bottles, or 100 boxes versus 20 boxes, and make it, you guys are all, I assume, used to making kind of large batches of syrups, of bitters, blends, what have you, kind of in the kitchen at your home bar. Like, that it's not that much harder to make a pot this size versus a pot that size, and then all you're doing is you're repackaging. So I actually would say, like, if you are able to kind of get together and find a way to kind of up your events by maybe bringing more people in and kind of having more partners, I think the events will be more lively. You'll overall still get the same amount of money as you do with getting an individual, but like that R&D work of like, okay, how are we packaging this? What is this recipe going to be? How are we preparing this? What vendors are we buying our like supplies from? That becomes exponentially easier because you're kind of doing that same amount of work for maybe 200 individual items as opposed to 30 individual items. And it does actually that volume makes a really large difference. Like, people don't usually think about all of that work, the like finding like the supplies that you need to get, like thinking through like all the R&D work. Like it is time, obviously the time of packaging everything as well, but it is quite a bit of time. So anything you can do to kind of up your volume, I would really encourage.
That's a very, very good point. You hit the nail on the head, and I wanted to answer a question real quick because we're going to get into questions here if anybody has any. The question that Beth Middleton had about how far in advance, you partially answered it. For me, it really depends. You have to look at the event that you're doing and make the decision. You have to look at what you're giving them. You always have to anticipate problems, right? So you have to give yourself some time for problems, some breakage, whatever, so delayed shipping. You have to look at, are you shipping it? What are you shipping it? Is it shelf stable or not? Which is where you guys come in. You guys have shelf stable stuff. You have to really, really look at this, especially when it comes to citrus and things like that. So you really have to look at how much time do I need to ensure the quality? How much time do I need to put this together? So I've done ones where I've shut it off 10 days before, but I've also done one where they're picking up basic kits, and I'll let them do it on the day of because I have extra stuff there. I have it. If I have it, I'll just sell it. So it really, really depends. You just want to make sure that you give yourself enough time that you can successfully do this without messing up your brand or putting yourself in a position to make it much more difficult. And it's funny because I actually had to I'm emailing with Alicia right now because somebody came to me and said, hey, I have 100 people. They want to do this. They're doctors. They're all over the country. They want to do this. So I said, well, let me see. And I'm emailing her with working with you guys to send this all out so I don't have to worry about it. You guys don't sell the booze. And here's the thing. This is where we get into the legal thing, right? I'm not shipping booze. So when I work with corporate clients, I say, here's the thing. I'll package up liquor for you or whatever, however it works for me to legally be able to do this. But if you want to send them out, then that's on you. You can send them out, or you can get airline bottles, you can send them out. I'm not sending them out. So I let them handle that. And then you guys or whoever can handle the shelf stable stuff. And then I kind of am the ringleader in this. And then once it all comes together. So these are all things to really consider when it comes to that sort of stuff. And like I said, shelf stable, that's a very important appeal of what you guys do to what I do is the shelf stable stuff and handling that stuff, because a lot of us are very busy and we just don't want to have time to deal with that stuff. So it's great to have people like you guys in the game. Does anybody?
I would briefly just want to add really quick, Eric. We don't ship alcohol ourselves. I would highly recommend nobody here does, but a lot of people do. So we actually partner with a company that ships that ships spirits, and we can provide that. But that being said, I mean, most of you will have a local liquor store that has a small shipping department. You can go talk to them and say like, hey, I want to do an event for 30 people. Are you able to ship, 375 milliliter bottles of, wild turkey to like these states? Like you can find shipping partners, like, unless you're doing a really local event where you're dropping or having pickups happen. I think you want to find some partners here and there. Certainly doesn't have to be us, but there's a lot of places out there that I think would be happy to help. And I am very confident that those of you in, I know we're talking to an international audience, but so those of you kind of in places where shipping alcohol is legal, which is not the case for about 20 or so states here in the US. But those of you who are not in those states, you probably have a local liquor store that ships, and you can go talk to them, and they would be, I'm sure, thrilled to send 30, 50, 100 bottles on your behalf and give you a small cut for that.
Thanks, Mike. So we're at the 2:00 time right now. Some of you guys have things to do. If you guys want to jump off, please jump off. Thank you very much. I want to open it up to any questions that anybody has. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself, please go ahead. If you have any questions for any of us, we'd be happy to try and answer them for you. We got Richie asking about pricing. Who's that, Richie? Who's that to? Are you asking for myself, or are you asking for Shaker and Spoon? Let me see here. Everyone. So, you guys have some pricing. Alicia actually sent me something that, you can look at. You guys have subscription kits, but you have sort of a la carte pricing as well. So some of that is on there. As far as pricing, you really kind of have to figure out your audience and what they're willing to pay. I'm not even if I'm doing corporate, I'm not looking to gouge anybody, but you do have to understand. I mean, my pricing tax, well, that's that's an interesting thing. And that depends on where you're at and how the tax system is laid out and what you're expected to do, whether it's, 1099s or different things like that. So definitely look at your local tax laws for doing something like this on your own, for sure.
You would have to register to collect sales tax. So unless you are registered to do that, you can't legally do that. Technically, you are supposed to, but every state is going to have some minimum. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you're from the United States. Every state has different sales tax laws. They're all a little bit convoluted. Theoretically, you're supposed to register in the state that you're doing business. Richie, I'm so sorry, I cannot speak about the Philippines. I do not know, but most likely you can probably get, like, for small things, you can probably get away with not, at least here in the United States, you cannot legally collect tax without registering to do so.
Yeah. This category is still kind of the Wild West a little bit. So, you just really want to make sure that you're not getting anybody sick, that you're keeping everybody safe, and that you're doing things, as close to legitimately as possible. But there definitely, especially with a lot of these laws changing in the last year and a half, there is a little bit of a gray area there. So let's see.
I do want to answer the pricing question real quick, just kind of as an in general rule. I would factor in what your hard costs are. Please don't forget the labor, which is quite a bit of it. Like add on, whatever you estimate it to be, you're probably wrong and you're probably low. So round up a little bit. And then my strong suggestion is whatever that number that you are pretty confident that it's going to cost you, double that is your price.
All right, Austin's leaving. Thanks, Austin. You're the best, man. Thanks for hopping on, and love you, buddy. So have fun at your concert. So yeah, pricing too, and that's another thing too, is don't undersell yourself. If you're getting a wholesale pricing on stuff, which many of us do, you're going to want to, just like any sort of shop or store or business, you're going to, I add on pricing to every single material that I touch and send out. It all gets marked up, all of it. So, you want to make sure that if you're taking the time to get something and pay for it and then turn around, you want to make sure that you're making a profit on it. Everything is different levels of profit. Maybe your markup for liquor is 50%, and then maybe you're hoping for a 20% tip, and then maybe you have some sort of, you're comfortable with doing sort of retail price markups on, like, a muddler. Factor that in, but make sure that you're recouping your money and making money on that, because your time is very valuable. And I have to tell you, I've never had somebody really balk at the price. As long as you're fair, that's really all that matters. And real quickly, I had a question from Adriana. Sorry, she got in a little late. Offering this service to company corporate events. So we kind of mentioned going to your local chamber of commerce, possibly pairing with a liquor brand to help you print up stuff that you can actually sort of pound the pavement and get out. These are things that social media is the obvious thing, right? We all know about social media, but we want to do things kind of the old-fashioned way too. So getting out there and hitting up businesses through print material, maybe that you can partner with a brand and then in turn use their product. You can partner with, I had mentioned, like, I did some wine dinners, so partnering with a cheese shop or partnering with somebody who can then help you sort of realize that goal. Maybe you're adding in some food to sort of expand this audience from outside yourself. So you could directly mail the HR department. A lot of that stuff kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But definitely get out there to find out who's putting on these events. A great person to reach out to, if you can go through LinkedIn. I don't know if you guys do this at Shaker and Spoon, but a great person to reach out to are executive assistants, because they're often tasked with putting on these events for their executive. I can't tell you how many times executive assistants have come to me and said, hey, we're looking to do this. My boss is a big shot and I really want to get this right. So LinkedIn executive assistants, that's who I would hit up.
I would also say nonprofit organizations, it's a little surprising maybe at first, and maybe they don't all pay quite as well. But a lot of them have pivoted to virtual, or there's a few that do like different events across the country. So people will be tuning in from 4 different time zones, or maybe they want a pre-recorded thing. So if you're comfortable pre-recording a tutorial and a little message. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate your support this year. Thanks for your donation. Here's how you make a drink. You know, there's money to be made. And some buzzwords you might want to use when reaching out to HR folks or assistants are things like hybrid, shared experience, connecting, engagement. If you can kind of speak their language a bit and tell them how you're going to make their lives easier and the value that you will bring their sales meetings, and growing their community and things like that, they really respond to those kinds of words.
Thank you. That's great. Anybody else? Anybody else want to hop on? Any questions? If you do, please just raise your hand, or Yoshi, thank you very much. We appreciate it, you being on with us. So again, thank you guys very much for jumping on with us and being a part of this. Yeah, you can always, I think I don't know if you joined, but they're up in the chat. Alex had put on some of our emails. If you can't go back and see that, Shaker and Spoon, I mean, even through the info, just probably, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think if somebody had mentioned that they had been on this seminar and that they had some questions, you guys could probably help them out with that. For myself, Eric Scott, you can find me at Eric_V as in Vincent_Scott. That's my Instagram. You can reach out to me if you have any questions and just want to talk further. I'm happy to. Oh, that's a good question, Adriana. I'm happy to help you guys out. How long do these events last? Well, number one, if you're doing them for somebody else, they will let you know how long it's going to last, and they will let you know when you need to speak and for how long. So that's kind of the easy thing. For me, I've noticed the sweet spot is between 1.5 and 2.5 hours. That's where people can really get, where they feel like they're getting their value, where they're not sort of like drinking too quickly, but then it's not going on too far. Right around 2 hours is where how long my events last. And when it's I do wine dinners and spirit tastings, but the sweet spot for me has been to give somebody a welcome cocktail and get it kind of the party rolling. Then we'll roll into making a cocktail, like a sour, like a gin gimlet or something. That usually happens about 35 to 40 minutes in. Then the next one we do is about an hour and 20 minutes in. That's like an old fashioned or something like that. And then we have a little bit of fun for like the last half hour. So 2 hours is about the sweet spot where you can still keep people's attention, where you don't get them too drunk, where they really feel like, and they feel like they've gotten the value, and you can sort of tell the story. So right around 2 hours is what I found it works well. Yeah, great question. A popular option is 30 to 45 minutes. I cannot talk for less than 30 minutes, Alicia. I'm sorry. I'm like, I have a problem shutting up sometimes. So all right.
Sometimes we have clients who are just like, people are going to sit here for a 3-hour meeting, and we just want to grab their attention at the top and give them something that'll help them make it through. Here's a cocktail.
Yeah, I've done some of those where I've actually had to jump on like 3 times over the course of and it's like at the top of the hour each time. And I've got like the 5-minute like morning show segment where I'm like, boom, 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 send it out back to the meeting. And then I come back like an hour later. So it all depends, especially when you're talking about the corporate stuff, when they want you in for how long. So, all right. Awesome. This was great, everybody. All right. My 9-year-old daughter gets off the bus in 4 minutes. So I'm going to say goodbye. But again, if you have any questions, please hit me up through Instagram or whatever. I'm happy to talk to you guys and work with you, give you some advice or whatever. Or if you have anything cool you want to share with me, I would love to hear it. But to all you, thank you guys very, very much. And thank you to Austin and the Shaker and Spoon folk for sure. I really love what you guys are doing, and for everybody out there. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers, everybody.